Everyone asks me, Dina, how do I play the middle game? And I say, depends on the position. You need to have a plan. But how do you find a plan? You know from the video about 10 most common mistakes that beginners do in chess that a bad plan is better than no plan. Well, in this video, we're gonna focus on good plans. So, how do you come up with a plan in any position? You master one thing and only one. Pawn structures. That's right. Pawns are GPS of chess. This means that you can look at the pawns, you can read them, you can listen to them, you can follow them. They are your guide into what direction to take whenever you're thinking about the position and the follow-up moves. Pawn structures tell you everything. They're like cards that predict the future. Where to attack, where to defend, which pieces to trade. Sounds too good to be true? Let me show you with a concrete example. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 most common pawn structures as well as some very common ideas and plans for both colors, meaning whether you're trying to play this position for white or black. Are you ready? Let's go. So the first pawn structure that we are gonna study is called the pawn wedge on d5, meaning the King's Indian pawn structure, which can also happen from some other openings, such as Benoni or Ruy Lopez, aka the Spanish. So the type of positions that we get here is usually known as closed. I'll show you this game between Jeroen Piquet and Garry Kasparov. So it started with d4, knight f6, knight f3, g6, a transition to King's Indian, c4, bishop g7, knight c3, short castle e4, d6, bishop e2, e5, short castle white goes, knight c6, and here is the decisive move that defines the whole pawn structure. It is d5, closing the center. Now, obviously, white doesn't have to close the center. They can also trade or just keep the center open, just play h3, bishop e3, and keep the tension like that. But d5 is a very common situation. And here, obviously, black is gonna go knight to e7, and I need to ask you first and foremost, what would be the plans in this position? Like, before I give you the answer, do you have any idea for yourself? You can write down in the comments below, but obviously I will as well give you the answer, otherwise what's the point of this video? So there is this certain thing as a pawn wedge, right? It's like the pawn chain and the direction where that chain is heading. So here you can see that white has very strong formation like this, but if we divide the board into 2 categories, we would see that this pawn chain is actually much stronger on this side, primarily because black has the very strong pawn formation here with c7, d6, and e5, and therefore they are gonna push their pawns on the king side because this is where there is their top of the hill. This is very common for many structures, for example, French defense and stuff like that. You always have such kind of like as a top of the hill. Black has this e5, therefore they're gonna push the pawns on the king side, whereas white has the d5, therefore the plan is gonna be to push the pawns here. This is how you know. So let's see how the game continues. Knight e1, just a prophylactical move to prepare f3, defend the center in the preparation for f5, but also to transform the knight to d3. Knight d7, preparing f5, as I told you. Bishop e3, finishing development here, goes f5, f3. And white secures this spot on f2 for the bishop. f4, attacking the bishop. Okay, we're gonna go bishop f2. And now g5. Exactly. Black starts the attack. And I do want to highlight that the reason why black starts the attack is not because, oh, we're playing King's Indian, so we're attacking. No, it is because white put the pawn on d5, and now black's e5 is very strong together with the d6 and c7. You see how strong is this pawn chain? Yeah, this is called the pawn wedge. Okay. b4 is the typical plan, of course, for white, because white is going to prepare c5, and basically whoever is going to be faster, either black is going to attack the king of white and smash them, or white, sometimes attack doesn't go that well, you know, it's like you need time and you need to know how to sacrifice. Or white is gonna open the c file, create the weaknesses, maybe c6, maybe c takes d6, pawn takes d6, and then attack over here. So knight f6 happened, c5, knight g6, c takes d6. This is our first target for white. This is the weakness on d6. So now we go rook c1, rook f7, and a4, bringing all the army here to this side. Now bishop f8, a5. I love this move, grabbing more and more space on the king side. Now bishop d7, okay. So we're gonna go knight b5, very logical move, hitting at the same time d6, but also c7, potentially targeting with the rook, and then attacking on a7 and g5. 4. So here, black goes all in. And white has an option. Should we take on this pawn on a7 or not? What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. In the game, white played knight c7. Apparently, spoiler, knight a7 was not great because there would be g3 attacking the bishop. And now let's say after bishop e8, black is just so fast we're starting their attack. And well, engine actually doesn't see that it's bad, but that was an option. Honestly, maybe it was a good move, but it didn't happen. Instead, white played knight c7, but here goes g3. Again, the same idea, but what to do with the bishop? White decides to take the rook. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. Black sacrificed the rook by playing g3. Now we take the rook, but they do not take the bishop at all. They go knight h5. Little do they care, obviously, because the bishop is trapped. But what happens if I take the bishop? Uh-oh. Something tells me you're just gonna lose after a checkmate. And after h3, they're gonna be bishop takes h3, pawn takes h3, queen h3, and then queen h2 checkmate. You see how fast it can develop the attack? In fact, black is the one who sacrificed. Knight h5, in the game there was king h1, pawn takes f2, rook takes f2, now knight g3, beautiful move, sacrificing the knight. And what if we take the knight? Uh-oh, I think the game would once again be over after the same idea, bringing the queen and the king is trapped. So white goes king g1, now queen takes a8, finally, bishop c4, removing the bishop, and here we have a6. Very interesting move, positional slow, but also bringing the queen. You're gonna see why this queen on a7 and this diagonal is gonna be very important in the game. b5, a takes b5, bishop takes b5, and the last move in the game. Try to guess. Ready? Knight to h1. And after king h1, black wins the rook and therefore is up a bishop. Game over. GG's. Nice, huh? Very good demonstration of, honestly, how to proceed with the attack in the King's Indian, something that you guys should master if you're interested in the King's Indian. And once again, I do want to highlight, it is not about the move orders. It's not about memorizing the moves order by order, buying your opening courses. No. Whenever you study openings, you need to study the typical pawn structures and the plans in those exact openings. And plus, by studying pawn structures, you can not just master one opening, but several openings at a time. All right, let's go for the example number 2. Pawn structure number 2, by far my favorite one. Carlsbad pawn structure. Have you heard of this one? It arrives from so many different openings. Those of you who have watched my videos on pawn structures lessons with Andrea Botas might be actually familiar. Does this position ring you some kind of bells?
Wait, the Carlsbad bells. That's what you mean.
Ooh, there we go. So here is the game between Bent Larsen and Rafael Cintron. And white started with d4, knight f6, c4, e6. This is one of those combinations where the Carlsbad can occur. Honestly, so many openings. This one is transposition to the Queen's Gambit. Could also be Nimzowitsch, could also be Caro-Kann, our favorite, with like from the white side in the exchange Caro-Kann, right? Can also be Slav defense, can be London. Yeah, the list goes on and on. The type of the position that arises here is somewhat called semi-open, because after bishop g5, bishop e7, c takes, e takes, we kind of have an open position, but both open files, c and e, are actually semi-open only, meaning they're open for one side and not open for another side, right? So it's like we're in the transition from the closed position to the open, meaning you should still keep your bishops on the board if you want to get the advantage. e3, short castle, bishop d3, c6, very typical clean, you see like that. Queen c2, h6, and in this game, white decides to give away the bishop. Bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and knight g2. Rook e8, finally, white castles. Sometimes in this pawn structures, we can also see long castle, but not here. So white castles and knight d7, and now we should just pause and talk about this pawn structure. So we already know that there are certain things such as pawn chains. Here, white has a pawn chain that is heading that way, and black has a pawn chain that is heading this way. Therefore, the plan of white is gonna be exactly the same analogy like we just saw. Bringing the knight to e4 and pushing the pawn f, sometimes both pawns, f and g, but mostly pawn f, not to weaken your king too much. Try to create some game and activity, sometimes even attack on the king side. Whereas Whereas for white, the plan is gonna be to push the b pawn to b5, a4 pawn, and to create a weakness on this side, something so called as the minority attack. So b4 happened in the game, a6, a4. Black is trying to stop white from pushing the minority attack, and now we go knight f8. Careful, the minority attack should be proceeded with caution because sometimes you can help your opponent only by creating him a pass pawn, right? Something that we studied from my videos in the endgames, very powerful source and tool for the endgames. But here, don't worry, it's only gonna be a backwards pawn. After a takes b5, a takes b5, rook a1, bishop d7. White has the opportunity to finally take on c6, and now the extra pawn of black on the queen side, only the backwards pawn. You know what's the definition of the backwards pawn, right? It's on the open file, it's the bottom of the pawn chain, it can be easily attacked and it's fixed by your opponent's pawn from the side, meaning it cannot easily move up. And then there is an easy potential to create an outpost here on the c5. So it looks like nothing, right? Even the ancient says that white has no advantage, but in this game we're gonna see a true mastery, how one grandmaster or strong player outplays another player by simply mastering the strategy of chess, something that I teach in my Russian chess school. Knight e4, heading to the outpost, queen a5, rook c1, putting the rook on the open file, just like I told you, remember? This is the weakness, so you need to gather all your pieces right here. Bishop e7, queen d1, rook a8, knight c5, finally grabbing that outpost. Bishop takes c5, rook takes c5, and queen a3. Again, for now, no real advantage, h3, and trust me, we're gonna have here a very long and enjoyable ride, and very slow, but like a slow beef cooking, very tender, very juicy. Knight e6, kicking the rook, rook c3, big deal, queen a1. Oh, you want to trade? Well, not right now. Rook c1, queen a3, bishop f5. Actually, what I do want to trade is I want to trade my bishop for your knight. And you would think oh, but wait a second, isn't the position open? Shouldn't you keep your bishop for yourself? And sometimes, my friends, it is not just about the pieces that you trade. It is true that this bishop is good and the position is open, so you might want to keep it for the knight. But no, it's not just about that. Sometimes it is also about what positions are left on the board. So here after queen a4, finally I'm okay to trade. Rook takes a4, and now bishop e6, pawn takes e6. It is about what pieces are left on the board. And now you are left with your bishop. Once again, if you studied my endgame course, if you watched the endgame video, you would know that this bishop is bad because it is surrounded by its own pawns.
I'm in a glass case of emotion!
So here the knight is gonna absolutely dominate the bishop. King f7, bring the king to the center, very good. Knight d3, okay, king e7, rook b1, rook a7, rook b8, and also the active rook versus the passive rook. White is threatening to enter with the rook. Bishop e8, now knight c5 outpost, bishop d7, g4, grabbing some space and also bringing your king to the center. King f7, king g2, rook c7, rook a8, bishop c8, king g3, king f6, f4, and look at the evil bar. You didn't even notice how it went up. That's what I call the outplaying. King f7, h4, king e7, h5, grabbing even more space, fixing the weaknesses on g7. King f6, king h4, preparing g5, king f7, g5, king e7, g6. Oh my god, this is humiliation. King f6, king g3, we don't hurry, king e7, king f3, king f6, e4, and we're creating another way to pass through, another weakness, another pawn break, and after e5, d takes e5, king e7, f5, black resigned. Very standard and a very typical game for you to understand how to play in the Carlsbad structure. Once again, I gave you plans for both colors. Alright, let's go to the next example. Example number 3 in our final pawn structure for today is gonna be closed Sicilian pawn structures. Why? Because so many of you play the Sicilian, but you often go to the open position. Do you know how to master the closed one? That's the basics, and we shall start with the basics. Let's take a look at this game between Vasily Smyslov and Karl Opusensky. So sometimes the Sicilian cannot just arise from the Sicilian occur, but also from the English defense. Exactly. Let's take a look. e4, c5, knight c3. I personally love Closed Sicilian, but you know by now, so that I usually play positional, so I love everything that is closed. All right, so c5, knight c3, d6, g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, d3, knight c6, knight e2. So far, the standard development. e6, bishop e3, knight d4, short castle for white, knight e7, and here I want to pause. Before I give you the next move, once again, I want to ask you, what are the plans? And I assume that you already know a lot about pawn structures and pawn chains, and you can see where black's potential pawn chain is heading, exactly, and where white's potential pawn chain is heading. So what should be the plan and the move here for white? 3, 2, 1, you got it! f4, exactly. So white's pawn plan is gonna be to push the pawns here, and black's pawn plan on the king side, push the pawns, also known as plants, on the queen side, because this is where they dominate. Also, look at this bishop on g7, it's gonna help a lot. All right, so rook b8, but sometimes, and this is a twist, you should not just move for yourself. You should also think for your opponent. And here, obviously, your opponent wants to prepare the attack for on the queen side. And sometimes a good way to defend is gonna be to anticipate. In this game, white is gonna do both. They're not just gonna prepare their plan and execute, but they're also gonna anticipate and stop their opponent from proceeding with their plan. So rook b1 is sometimes preparing actually b4. All right, so knight c6, a3, exactly. That's my move. Something a little bit more advanced because it's the example number 3, so you're ready for that. Queen a5. So black is trying to do something, help their plan on this side, and here honestly everything is ready, and white should absolutely have proceeded with b4, which would be sacrificing a pawn, except for black cannot take that pawn because the knight is hanging. So they would probably need to take, and after take the knight, it would have been f5, yeah. So in this position, had black taken the pawn, white would continue their attack tremendously, super fast and super strong, and that deviation would only be hurting our friend. But unfortunately in the game, white was not very precise and decided to prepare it a little bit and played bishop d2. And after queen c7, obviously an x-ray, queen has to go back. We played b4, b6, and king h1. So now white is back to the equal line, but what is important here is that this is just a distraction and anticipation and deviation from letting black get what they want, because the real plan for white is going to be just the old same king side attack. So bishop b7, b takes c5, b takes c5, and now everything is ready for f5. And now after pawn takes, white is smashing black, even though the evil bar says it's all okay. But after knight f5, very often we're gonna see this sacrifice of the exchange. Not yet. Knight e4, h5. Now black is afraid to castle, and that's understandable because their king would be naked. And the problem is that black has nowhere to castle, so knight f4, h4. Black is trying to, compensate the no castle by starting the attack themselves, but here goes g4, knight e7, knight h5. So, who is dominating on the h file right now? Bishop e5. Okay, and we go knight f6. And we officially take the right of castle away from black. King f8, h3, knight e5, knight e4. We don't want to trade those bishops, no, because our bishop is protecting our king and their bishop is blocking their own rook. So bishop takes e4, they give away the bishop, but that's fine. Bishop takes, now d5, rook takes b8, queen b8, bishop back to g2. For now, white's advantage is not as decisive yet, but you'll see how the attack is going to be stronger and stronger. Knight to g6, queen e7, king e8, queen f2, queen c7, bishop e3, d4, trying to block this bishop, but it often happens so in chess, whenever you're blocking one piece, you are activating another one. This light squared bishop plus, with a dark squared bishop, I'm cutting your king. So king d7, bishop e4, and here black does the decisive mistake by trying to find a piece and a shelter for their king, but truth to be told, there is none. After king c8, black forgets that they cannot any longer bring the rook to the defense, and after rook b1, there is no way to defend from the rook interfering, what's the inter word? You got it, intersecting. No, that's not the word. Rook f8, And now queen g2, no rush. We're gonna get that b7 square, f5, completely burning the bridges. As often, honestly, my friends, that often happens in chess. Whenever you're trying to defend a losing position, you only destroy it and lose even faster, because you cannot just hold and stay there because you know what's gonna happen. So you lose your nerves, you lose your patience. So g takes f5, e takes f5, and now bishop b7, king d7, queen d5, queen d6, bishop c6, and black side. Okay, let's try to make a move. Let's say knight d7, just rook b7, and we want the queen. As easy as that. King moves somewhere, and we got it. So here were 3 most basic pawn structures that you guys should master if you really want to understand the game of chess and finally start thinking with your brain and know what the heck you are doing. Let me know if you like the format of this video, if you want to see more of the games like this analyzed. Thank you for watching. Bye.